TSI Mirrors VMT Energy number 1584, VPT 118, the 1st of April 2026. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category Stroke. Introduction. This paper provides a simple physics-based explanation of misstroke as a threshold crossing event, using results derived from both VMT energy analysis and the TSI score. In this study, I demonstrate that my C trajectory mirrors my VMT strain stress energy pattern quite closely. Both approaches describe the same underlying biomedical system behavior, but from different viewpoints. C is an arithmetic indicator. VMT is a geometric energy indicator. When both signals show the same pattern, this suggests internal consistency in the biomedical model structure. My medical research results indicate that my stroke event did not occur randomly. Instead, it occurred near the end of a prolonged and accumulated high-energy period. This behavior is consistent with many physical and engineering systems where cumulative strain energy gradually weakens structural stability until a threshold is reached. The attached figures include TSI time trajectory from 2024 to 10 through 2026-03, which includes 9 pre-stroke months and 9 post-stroke months. VMT strain stress diagram using PP, SPP, and EEG as 3 inputs and TSI as the output strain. VMT energy contribution percentages from each of the 3 input stressors. Identification of the pivot point near 2025-06 and 2025-07. The VMT energy contribution shares are PP equals 36%, SPP equals 33%, EEG equals 31%. These 3 variables contribute almost equally to the total system energy, indicating that the stroke event is not caused by a single dominant factor but rather by interaction among multiple factors. This equipartition of stress suggests that I am dealing with a systemic condition rather than an isolated failure mechanism. If one factor contributed, for example, 80% of the total energy, the solution would be relatively straightforward, since I could focus primarily on controlling that single dominant input stress. However, because the 3 stressors are balanced, the system response reflects coupled interactions among multiple physiological mechanisms. Therefore, my strategy must address all 3 factors simultaneously. Managing only one variable while allowing the others to remain elevated would not sufficiently reduce total system strain energy. Balanced stress contributions require balanced control. This explains why integrated management of PP, SPP, and EEG represents the most viable path toward improving overall system stability. My TSI is defined as the interaction among 3 physiological variables for generating an early warning regarding my stroke risk. TSI equals PP 45 * SPP 120 * EEG 120 * amplifier. The amplifier value depends on the patient's diabetes history: 100 for duration 10 years milder condition, 110 for duration 10 to 20 years moderate condition, 120 for duration greater than 20 years more severe condition. For heart disease patients who do not have a diabetes condition, a default glucose value of 120 mg (DL) is used by the system. In this situation, the glucose term becomes neutral in the equation and does not distort the mathematical structure, while allowing the TSI model to remain applicable to cardiovascular disease (CVD) patients. Elevated energy plateau before the event, from 2024 to 10 to 2025-06, my TSI-3B values remain mostly near or above 100. This indicates that my biomedical system remained in a relatively elevated TSI strain energy state for an extended time period. In viscoplastic mechanics and fatigue theory, damage accumulation is both time and path dependent. Repeated moderate loading can gradually weaken structural integrity even when individual loading events do not appear catastrophic. Small overloads repeated many times can produce irreversible structural weakening. This pattern is reflected in my cumulative exposure values: 20 to 410 baseline, 020 to 503 about 20%, 2025-05 about 38%, 2025-06 about 41%, 2025-07 about 69%. My stroke happened on June 21, 2025. During this period, interacting metabolic and hemodynamic stress remained persistently elevated. Turning point as failure transition. At 2025-07, my TSI value drops sharply from 103.86 to 91.40. This change represents a structural transition in engineering language. This type of transition often indicates that the system has crossed a stability boundary. Possible interpretations include: 1. System stiffness changed to boundary conditions changed. 3. Structural equilibrium shifted. This type of behavior is commonly observed in physical and engineering systems after crack propagation, yield transition, structural relaxation after rupture, redistribution of stress flow, or release of stored strain energy. The sudden drop does not represent recovery alone. Represents a change of system state. Post-event regime shift. After 2025-07, my TSI value stabilizes in a lower range approximately between 92 and 98. This indicates that my system does not return to the previous elevated oscillation band near 100 to 105. Instead, my system settles into a different trajectory region. This behavior is consistent with permanent structural alteration, vascular remodeling, changes in vessel compliance, adjustment of physiological control feedback, and changed energy dissipation patterns. In physics terms, the system moved from one equilibrium basin to another. Mathematical interpretation KISS. Keep it simple and straightforward. My TSI equation expresses the multiple interaction among three physiological variables through the arithmetic operation of multiplication, which naturally represents dependency among variables. The three variables are glucose exposure, E, pulse pressure PP, and systolic blood pressure SPP. Their combined effect is expressed in a simple arithmetic form, TSI equals E asterisk PP asterisk SPP. Multiplication reflects the idea that the total system response depends on the combined condition of all three variables rather than any single factor alone. If any one of these variables has a zero value, then the TSI value will also approach zero, meaning the interacting load on the system becomes minimal. This behavior is consistent with many physical systems where the overall effect disappears when one essential component is absent. To make the TSI model also applicable to heart disease patients who do not have diabetes, the glucose component cannot be left undefined. In such cases, the system assigns a default EG value of 120 mg, DL normal reference level. This means the glucose term becomes neutral in the equation, so it does not distort or dominate the TSI value. By assigning a physiologically reasonable baseline value, the mathematical structure of the equation remains intact, while the model becomes applicable to both diabetes patients and non-diabetes cardiovascular disease CVD patients. This approach preserves the integrity of the multiplicative interaction and increases the practical usability of the TSI model across broader patient groups for both stroke and CVD applications. If the addition operation were used instead of multiplication, the combined result would be smaller and would not fully represent the dependency among variables. Addition treats each factor as independent, while multiplication reflects interaction and amplification. Biomedical phenomena often involve interacting mechanisms rather than isolated causes. Therefore, multiplication better represents real system behavior. When one variable increases while the other variables remain elevated, the total system response increases proportionally. When all three variables remain moderately elevated over a sustained period, the combined effect grows nonlinearly, meaning the total physiological burden accumulates faster than simple linear addition would suggest. This arithmetic behavior is highly consistent with many pathophysiological situations, where interacting factors amplify overall system stress beyond what would be predicted by independent effects alone. This behavior is not additive, it reflects amplification arising from interaction among variables. In this way, multiplication provides a simple but meaningful mathematical representation of interacting pathophysiological stress, consistent with the observed behavior of complex biomedical systems. Why the pivot is meaningful. My charts show a clear pattern: elevated plateau, followed by transition, and then followed by stabilization at a lower level. This pattern is commonly observed in many physical and engineering systems such as fatigue failure curves, earthquake stress release curves, plastic deformation transitions, and tipping point behavior in nonlinear dynamic systems. The stroke event does not appear as an isolated random spike. Instead, it appears as the result of trajectory evolution over time. The event reflects cumulative strain reaching a structural limit. Relationship between TSI values and VMT strain stress energy. TSI and VMT energy describe the same system behavior from different mathematical perspectives. TSI represents interaction strength at each time step. VMT represents accumulated strain stress energy across the trajectory over a time scale. Here, TSI behaves like a warning indicator and VMT energy behaves like a stored work indicator. When both signals show similar trajectory patterns, this suggests that the simplified multiplicative equation preserves the same structural information captured by the more sophisticated geometric topology or strain-stress energy approach. In simple terms, TSI is the arithmetic shadow of VMT energy. Scientific considerations. This analysis is based on my longitudinal dataset over 18 months from the 1st of October 2020 through 3/31/20 to 6. The model demonstrates internal consistency between arithmetic interaction structure and geometric strain-stress energy structure. Future validation may include sensitivity testing of normalization constants, comparison with alternative multiplicative structures, longer-term predictive observation, application to additional longitudinal datasets. Despite these considerations, the current results show a stable and interpretable structure rather than random variation. Conceptual summary. My figures support the following interpretation. Stroke event is not random bad luck. Stroke event reflects cumulative interacting strain reaching a structural limit. Therefore, my stroke happened right after the peak time point of my TSI curve or accumulated VMT energy. TSI functions as a system stress indicator. Its trajectory behavior suggests system stability gradually reduced, interaction load persisted, threshold condition reached, event occurred. System shifted to a new equilibrium state. Conclusion. This is a sophisticated piece of medical research work. I have essentially created a bridge between structural engineering and metabolic pathology. My stroke appears to be the result of accumulated interacting physiological load over time, consistent with principles of viscoplastic strain-stress energy and nonlinear TSI system transition. In other words, TSI Mirrors VMT Energy both describe the same underlying system dynamics. The love story metaphor, movie versus snapshot. Traditional medical diagnosis is like looking at a single static photograph of the two lovers walking along the Charles River. It captures a frozen moment of apparent health but remains blind to the narrative trajectory. In contrast, my research views the body's pathophysiology as the entire 1970 love story film, where every data point is a frame revealing the slow building, cumulative tension of the plot. I watched the film Love Story while studying at MIT near Harvard in the early 1970s, which makes the analogy between snapshot observation and full trajectory understanding especially meaningful to me. While a physician sees only the still of a normal blood pressure reading, my use of viscoplastic energy and topology tracks the irreversible strain and metabolic foreshadowing that occur long before the climax. By watching the movie rather than the picture, I can identify the exact turning point where the cumulative energy of the story shifts from stability to structural failure, allowing me to intervene in the script and stabilize the system within a safer, lower energy new basin before the final scene is written. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to T.E. author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.